Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. With your powers combined is not a thing. That's not a thing.
No,
that's
unless you're,
with the listeners.
Part of a Dragon Ball Z reference or something, or doing a spirit bomb. It's a very niche reference for anyone who grew up in the late 90s, early noughties. Anyway.
Hang on. You don't think with your powers combined is a reference to Dragon Ball Z, do you, Adam?
No.
The entire time have you been associating those two things? Yeah.
Isn't it? Is that what he says, or does he say
with your powers combined, I am Captain Planet?
Captain Planet.
I thought it was actually with our powers combined.
I think it's your powers, because he's coming out of their powers, Captain Planet.
Yeah, because they have the rings, heart.
We're all about fact-checking here on Unnatural Selection. Wind, water, heart.
Especially when it comes to niche 90s cartoon references. Well, niche, everyone's heard of Captain Planet. I guess calling it niche is probably not.
I just thought of like Goku being like, everyone give me your energy. That's all. That's the first thing that popped into my head.
Damn. With our powers, by your powers combined.
Oh God, we're all wrong.
By your powers combined, I am Captain Planet. Captain Planet.
I'm glad we sorted that out.
Gonna take pollution down to zero.
Oh, the Captain Planet theme slaps.
It's pretty good.
Once more with feeling. All 90s cartoon themes slap, I think. Well, not even cartoons, just children's television shows in general, like late 80s, early 90s. Peak period for jingles. That's all I'm saying.
Trapdoor?
Yep.
Trapdoor,
open
amazing.
up
Fireman
the
Sam?
Door, cause there's something
Fireman
down
Sam?
there.
It's fucking ace.
Oh yeah, Fireman Sam. Postman Pat. Postman Pat is also quite a catchy banger.
Yeah. The Power Rangers theme song. I'm sorry, that is like
certainly slaps.
Yeah. Anyway.
Certainly slaps. Speaking of slapping, slap Nazis.
Okay, we're going straight there. All right. We'll go on then. Nazi salutes have been performed on the step of Victorian Parliament as protesters clash over trans rights. Obviously, you've got the vast majority of people that think trans people are people and should exist. And then you've got the tiny minority of virulent, violent psychopaths that think they don't exist and they shouldn't exist and should be punished for existing. Wow,
that is actually a contradiction I hadn't really noticed with a lot of trans.
You never noticed that?
It was like, wait. Are you all saying that? Like, do you believe that that trans people don't exist and are just mentally ill people, or do you believe they exist and should be shunned? Because you can't hold those two thoughts at the same time.
You can't. It's hard to hate something that you've already erased as a group. So,
or don't believe ever existed in the first place.
But Nazis will manage it. So a group of men have performed Nazi salutes on the step of Victorian Parliament. About 30 people from the National Socialist movement marched along Spring Street Saturday afternoon, repeatedly performing the salute at the anti-transgender rights rally. So basically...
We should break it down, though, in terms of the sequence.
Let's break it down.
Break it down.
So there was what the event was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there was a guest speaker, right?
Yeah, I forget the name. I think
Kelly J. Keane.
Yeah,
Mitchell.
also referred to as Posey Parker, and I'm not sure which one's the real name, which one's not. I frankly don't care to find out. But yeah, this person, prolific, transphobic British personality,
rights activist.
They keep saying activist. I feel that's not an appropriate term. I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me. So people sort of phrasing it like that. I mean, the term I would use is cunt. But,
it's not very feminist of you, Tom.
No, it's absolutely not.
You don't have to like the activism to admit that they're an activist. A men's rights activist is still an activist, even if they're wrong, even if they're incorrect.
But I guess they're kind of...
It's like saying, I didn't find your comedy funny, therefore you're not a comedian. It's like, well, if they're getting up on stage and telling jokes, they're a comedian. Doesn't really matter if you find it funny or not.
Did you pay for the ticket?
Did you? Yeah, exactly.
I suppose. But I guess in the case of I don't want to derail the conversation there too much. But I mean, there'd be at least people who talk about men's rights activism stuff where you are advocating at least for some rights in a context that you then have used to be misogynistic pigs. Anyway. Forget it. So yeah, done. Well, what's her face? Who's a McFungle? Just was hosting a talk. She's been going around Australia. I think she's been in Brisbane and some other places as well, just giving hosting little poorly attended, I might add, rallies of people to people who I think it's called some movement called like Let Women Speak or something, where they're going off this idea of like we are protecting women's spaces by not allowing people who they deem to not be women to be in them, and that it's an oppression on women's rights that trans women exist. And then I guess they also lump into their fuck trans men too. They're terrible. And or anyone in between on the gender binary. Yeah. So hosting an event like that, super fucked up. And, counter protests have happened at these events as well. And so usually there's been a big police presence just keeping them separated and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know if this happened at any of the other ones, but in the one in Melbourne yesterday,
what is it with Nazis in Melbourne?
They seem to have a big presence here in Victoria, don't they? Which I don't love. I love Victoria. I don't love the Nazi problem.
We've got the Grampians. We've got good coffee. And we've got occasionally Nazis having coffee in the Grampians hanging out together.
Yeah.
So we've got those three things. That's how you know it's Melbourne. That's how you know it's Victoria.
Yeah. And so at some point during all this, as George said before, about like 30 guys all dressed in black, some of them with like black bandanas, like covering up to the eyes, waving Australian flags and, some just gross signage, throwing up Nazi salutes, both just on Spring Street, standing on the steps of Parliament next to this group that were hosting their transphobic event. And also just parading around and marching right past the line of police that were between them and the protesters, the pro-trans protesters.
If I was the person running this anti-transgender rally, first of all, I'd punch myself in the face repeatedly until I passed out. But then I would consider, what is it about my movement that seems so Nazi adjacent? That Nazis would, you know what I mean? Like at no point do the anti-transgender people go like, are we the baddies? Because if ever there was anything that I was in charge of when Nazis showed up and appeared to be on the same side as me, I might have a moment where I would think, oh, am I on the right side if I'm on the same side as the Nazis? Probably not. And then I would cease doing that thing.
That someone who's running a
anti-trans
thing has introspection in the first place.
Oh, they certainly do.
And a thing called empathy.
I'm not going to get into the theory of mind of an anti-trans activist because boy, that mind seems awfully scary to be in. But you have to assume that there's at some point when people are zig-heiling up and down the street, you think, how did I? Yeah, and it just like turns to the camera like in a movie. You're probably wondering how I got here.
Yeah, 100%, because it's just wild. The fallout from this has been pretty bananas on several different fronts, but I feel one of them is how, like, a lot of people have been characterizing saying, hey, so Nazis showed up at your rally and you seemed to not mind.
You seemed chill with that.
And were chill that they were there and appreciated the support. And these people, the mental gymnastics that's been on display, across at least the Twitter posts from people who were at this rally or like part of it. Saying things from, well, like all the pro-trans protesters had been putting up signs with things saying like, fight the far right and turn up at this event. So of course the far right are going to show up and defend themselves. That's not our fault. It's your fault the Nazis turned up.
Hang on. Wow, but they don't have to, if they don't go, they don't have to defend themselves. It was rhetorical fighting the far right. It was that's not saying 1v1 me IRL, bro. That's not what they're saying. And the Nazis are like, well, I'm not a little bitch. I gotta turn up to fight them in person. Like I gotta defend them.
To be fair, that logic probably does play in the minds of some of these people.
Interestingly, though, this time around, I noticed the neo-Nazis are masked. Not to protect other people from COVID, but just to protect them from revealing their identities. And I would have argued that the last time the neo-Nazis were out, it was anti-mask, and now they're wearing masks. It's, pick your battles.
Masks are great now.
I thought masks are good.
Inconsistent.
Okay, that's interesting.
Very, very inconsistent. But then, furthermore, that's obviously the line of thinking where they're like, whoa, like we didn't invite the Nazis and they just rocked up, and they rocked up because of challenges that you made.
What is this,
and
Poland?
Then these same people then started twisting round to be kind of like, they're sticking with the we didn't welcome them or whatever, but then turning around to be like, well, both us, women feminists, as they call themselves, sort of thing, are against pedophiles, and so are Nazis. Why are you not?
This is not a mutually exclusive thing. What? This is not. I don't need to. What? I don't need to. We can safely assume that everyone is on the anti-pedophile side of things. Surely we can assume that much. We can assume that we could give that much credit to the other side to be like, I'm going to go ahead and assume they're not pro-pedophilia.
Yeah, and just
seems to be a thing in some of these far right circles.
They're obsessed. They're absolutely obsessed with pedophiles. Obsessed.
I don't understand it.
And it's straight from things like the Nazi playbook
and QAnon
of how you
information warfare,
how you characterize the other that you are wanting to marginalize and oppress.
But
I just thought it was funny that then they turned from being even though they never said any of this at the event, they never got on their megaphone to say, hey, Nazis, fuck off, we're trying to stand up for what we perceive to be women's rights, but you fuck off, Nazis. But then afterwards, they're like, no, we weren't with them. And then they're like, well, the Nazis and us are on the same page that pedophiles are bad. Why aren't you on the page? Wait a minute. Did I just say Nazis and I are on the same page? But no, they lack that level of empathy and introspection that we mentioned earlier. So it's just been quite amazing to see that flip-flop back and forth.
And this has all been, just to clarify, Tom, this has all been happening on Twitter? Or where have you been following all this? I went to Laser Tag yesterday. I turned my phone off for 6 hours and I come back and the world's blown up.
Adam, as I said in last week's episode, that George and I are chronically online, but it turns out in this instance, it was me who was chronically online.
I think I've got a healthy. I'll drop in tweet, at Insiders once a week. I'll get a couple of headlines, and then I'm sort of offline for the rest of the time. I feel like I've got a healthy balance.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, I think there's a lot of just people I follow, or that people I follow also follow that lovely little echo chamber, but people who are quite active in, reporting and discussing events like this and also being on the ground. Because for the record, I was not at the protest. So all this information I have as to what went on was from the various clips,
videos and little clips and stuff
and things that people have been pushing around, and also reported in the news and stuff like that. So people were just showing hey, here's 4 tweets from one of the women who hosted the anti-trans event, and here's 4 of them across the afternoon, and you see them start with "we are not with them" to "we both share this idea." It's whoa, hang on, that was fast.
It's kind of it reminds me of
a day makes.
Reminds me of when when you're just starting out in theatre and you've just put on a show and you're really need to get some bums on seats. Fuck, I'll do anything to sell a ticket.
Yeah, you're just saying that they really needed an audience.
Yeah.
You just put on the poster, Nazis drink free, and
drink free. Walk up to the door. Just get them in the door. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. 30 bums on seats are still bums on seats. So it's interesting that what you guys mentioned earlier about the whole sort of pedophilia thing, because that definitely feeds into a lot of far right Republican politics. Calling people groomers, and the whole thing with QAnon. It's about Democrats. Falsely accusing Democrats of being part of some child sex cult.
Yes, satanic
child pedophilia. Yeah, the whole satanic panic in the 80s in America was very much around all of this sort of stuff. So the idea of child sacrifices and pedophilia and grooming, and it is a theme in sort of far right politics that. Yeah, to not only to discredit people, but also to, it's what's the most repulsive thing that you could think of, right? It's like a child rapist or a child murderer or something like that. So, It's an activity that's used to diminish your opposition and make them subhuman. So then whatever you do to them is justified. And similar to what's happening in Russia as well, with Vladimir Putin saying that initially, we're invading Ukraine. We're invading, not invading Ukraine, defensively invading Ukraine in the war that they started, which we took the first step in, to denazify Ukraine. And then now it's evolved beyond that, because like the Nazi thing's not hitting too hard, because I guess there's a bunch of far right fascists in Russia. So they're like, isn't Nazism kind of what we're into? So now they're saying it's about the transgender pedophile Nazis. That's what they're trying to, it's the transgender pedophile Nazis that they're trying to cleanse out of the Ukraine. And that's their justification for going to war. So it's like, seems
Putin does around the whole, like, we're got to fight the pedophiles thing quite a bit as well. It's almost like he's just like gone
Western
on Fox
values
News and just like.
but this is what we've always talked about, the sort of cross pollination between fuckheaded ideas across the world in the far right space. This is how these ideas are transmitted through Reddit, through QAnon, through forums, through mis and disinformation. Like there is a common strain between the far right Russian politics and far right American politics and far right politics here. They all seem to have the same, more or less the same wrong-headed views about mostly everything, right? So whether that be, trans rights or, pedophilia or the West or whatever, it's all a very similar kind of milieu that they're swimming in.
The thing as well, I guess the thing that we were talking about before the show is what should have the police done? I didn't read a whole lot into it, so I'm not as familiar with it. My understanding was they were sort of trying to prevent, from what we were saying before the show, they were trying to prevent
the Nazis getting straight up murdered,
from getting beaten up,
yeah,
effectively.
So there was about 30 Nazis and like hundreds of counter protesters, because like as much as Nazism is a problem, mercifully, it is still a pretty fringe view here in Australia. So when these Nazi rallies happen, we're not talking about tens of thousands of people taking to the streets like we're going to talk about in France later on in the show. But we're talking about, in this case, literally less than 3 dozen people, out on the streets making a fool of themselves, young men. Who knows how much of it they actually believe or how much of it is just them like LARPing, live action shit posting.
I just want to have some friends.
I don't know, because I hear a lot of accounts of men that have previously been part of these groups and then they grew up a little bit and they're like, I'm actually horrified that I was part of that group, but it was like a community thing. It's like the red pill on Reddit, where it's like, I was just in a community with my bros and like I really like to talk about self-improvement and all that sort of stuff. And I just got kind of sucked into the all women are like that misogyny stuff. But like, I think a lot of it is like young, white, borderline racist dudes on the internet coagulating around these communities and finding each other because of, something community. And then, they get older and they realize, actually, this is all fucking abhorrent and this isn't for me. I've heard a lot of accounts like that. I'm sure there are old Nazis as well, that are just like, this is my belief system. I'm a terrible person. I'm sure there's that as well. But this is, in this case, at least, it's a very small group of people that are there representing this. They're there to be provocative. They're deliberately provoking. They're walking along, but they're like zig-heiling to the crowd because it makes, it sort of, triggers the libs, and they know that and they love that, and that's why they're there. So a lot of the commentary online was talking about why were the police facing against the counter-protesters who are correct and not the Nazis. And I would say it's probably because they're just like vastly, vastly outnumbered, because it's a terrible niche minority point of view. And they're just like stopping them from being like beaten to death on Spring Street. So the important thing is to keep
stopping them being beaten to death. From what Tom was saying, they then subsequently were like
they then subsequently got essentially a police escorted parade.
Yeah,
which
is not good,
because the Nazis didn't show up at the start. Was my understanding? Was they
arrived halfway through? Like it's a house party. Like,
lazy,
hey guys, I'm here.
Yeah,
lazy fucking Nazis.
They arrived and were allowed past the police line.
I thought the whole thing with Nazis was that they were all about German like efficiency and making the trains run on time. If you're going to be a racist, a bunch of Nazi shitheads turning up to a rally, you should at least turn up on time.
Yeah, and I think and from my understanding as well, just from the kind of, I think, people that would go out to protest an anti-trans event, I don't think they are there to beat the living shit out of anybody. They are there just to show we disapprove of this view.
I agree, but having seen some of the footage where people are trying to break through the police line and like trying to have a go at these Nazis, I was like, you could easily see a situation like that where there's like 10-1 where, people's are very heightened. And I agree, if I was there in the crowd and someone was throwing Zig Heils at me, I'd be furious as well. But you could easily see how a situation like that could spiral into violence very quickly.
100%, which is why you move on the fucking 30 dudes. I think it's easier to move 30 dudes than it is to hold back a crowd of hundreds of really angry people.
The problem is
we're talking about what's the easiest solution.
Given the current legal, that's true. I agree with that, and that is what they should have done in retrospect. The problem is there's nothing illegal about what Nazis are doing and saying currently in Australia.
But the police
it's not illegal to do a Zig Heil.
Can move troublemakers on when under any kind of criteria that they sort of deem. It's this weird thing of the police can go like, you're a problem, move on, you have to leave, and we will force you to, kind of thing. And they just didn't do that. They were just kind of like, yep, cool. And while they're holding the crowd back, like, it's one thing for just the crowd are wanting to get in there and yell at some Nazis. The Nazis then just went, oh, cool, well, we'll just parade right past them with the police.
Yeah, they're like, being deliberately
you do your thing. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah, you do your thing. We don't care. Yep, you just parade around. That's fine. Yeah, high five, bro. Like that time, like in 2015, where one of the cops high-fived a Nazi. Do you remember that? That was fucked.
I don't.
There's definitely also a streak with this kind of group. Part of what they will do is they want to start some shit. Because if they start some shit, it's evidence of, we're being repressed, / look at these crazy people that we're trying to fight against.
I'm being oppressed. See the violence inherent in the system.
And then it's all on video. I'm sure there'd be guys with GoPros there and shit that would have been filming all of it.
You can see
what I mean. Like,
and part of that is content for the echo chamber for the purposes of recruiting. 100%. Like that is showing them being hard done by. I go, look, the white man in Australia can't get a fair shake. They're attacking us. It's all about the browns coming after the good-natured whites just for their freedom of speech, just because my perspective doesn't line up with theirs. It's a radical left. Yeah, it's all part of their recruiting toolkit, right?
It's interesting because, there has been a growth, and we've been talking about it for probably since just before the pandemic. There's been a growth in far-right activity in Victoria over the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Well, that's what that Grampians joke that I was making was a reference to that. A bunch of neo-Nazis headed up to the Grampians and had a nice little Zig Heil, camping trip situation and just walking through a town. Everyone looking like, the fuck? The neo-Nazis just marching through our tiny town? What the fuck happened?
But the thing is, as you said, it's interesting because I'm sure these kind of groups would be being watched by certain police organizations, whether that be federal or state. But in terms of what they can actually prosecute, there's probably not a whole lot there. They're just talking about shit online and then occasionally meeting up for coffee in the Grampians. I guess the question being is, where does the line between free speech and something like illegal?
There's
already been pushes after yesterday by both, I think, some politicians in the state government and the police union, weirdly enough, for them to be saying we need to be outlawing, like, we're not just Nazi symbolism, because there was that legislation that outlawed things like the swastika being displayed and all that sort of stuff, but also the Nazi gestures, like the salute and all that sort of stuff, which I think is a great idea. I just think, hey, police union, maybe, I don't know, talk to your dudes who were fucking beating the shit out of protesters and doing nothing about the Nazis first, because sure, they might not have been doing anything illegal, but who also weren't doing anything illegal? People just being there, being angry and protesting, and whose skulls got cracked in.
And the headline of
none of the Nazis.
I agree. I think I agree with the police union there. It is, I think they were making representations to government saying, hey, you should make this like these, doing Zig Heils Nazi, like you should make, there are other places in the world where this is illegal. And if it's illegal, then it's enforceable by us. We can do something about it if these guys show up. So if that's a big step for the police union to make representations to government asking for that, I think is a big deal. And I think that's a positive sign. But yeah, I mean, you were telling me about an incident. I haven't seen it documented, but yeah, about an incident where someone on the pro-trans side of things, anti-Nazi side of things, was getting beaten up, and obviously that's not on. You don't know the circumstances.
Just one of those.
But that's not who you... I don't know. In this scenario of the two sides, that's not the people I'd like to see getting beaten up. I don't know.
Could have been quite agitated, understandably so. But like when people are saying, "Oh, you're resisting arrest," I was like, "You're not really resisting arrest anymore when there's 5 dudes pinning you to the ground, and then a 6th one knees you in the head a couple times." Yeah. So
and I get I don't know if you're trying to push past a police officer and they sort of go, "Oh, you touched me," like now it's on. Like I do think there is a contingent within the police.
They are so keen to punch people. They are so keen to bash people.
There are coppers that I've seen it. There are coppers that are like that where they're just like keen for a fucking punch on. And they're just I'm not saying that's all cops, obviously, but like there's definitely a contingent in the police force that are happy to kick the shit out of someone.
Yeah.
As to your question before, Adam, as to like investigations, or was it Tom? You're saying there must be investigations of white supremacist
My
groups.
Question, but I'd assume that there would be ongoing sort of monitoring.
So like ASIO has, I'm sure there's been things from ASIO in the past that they've talked about white supremacy as a problem in particular.
I remember I thought we talked about that at the time.
The largest terrorist threat that they're monitoring at the moment is white supremacists.
What right-wing extremism or something was like
But there's also
whether they knew that this group was going to rock up.
Well, I don't know.
Before they did.
Well, maybe. Like a lot of the coverage since has like screenshots from text message kind of forum posting.
Telegram chains and that sort of shit.
Yeah, and all that sort of stuff. So they get that information from somewhere.
There's a great documentary on Stan called Revealed Amongst Us, where which is kind of a weird title, but it's a great documentary and which goes into exactly this white supremacist activity in Australia. And basically they had a guy, the journalist had a guy undercover in one of these groups for like several years, and with audio recordings and all this sort of stuff. And, really sinister shit that they're doing, like training camps, like boot camps for like for the coming race war and all that sort of stuff. Like, doesn't sound too unlike what Adam's doing in his laser tag stuff out in the bush.
It is nothing like that, and I don't want you to characterize what we're doing.
No.
We're basically LARPing most of the guys who play it.
I'm making a joke. But
George, I actually said sort of words to the opposite before, because I think the reason Adam's phone was off for 6 hours yesterday was because he was at laser skirmish. So like clearly none of those guys are Nazis.
None of those
They were with Adam laser skirmishing. They weren't in front of Parliament.
No. So I'm making a joke there. No, and I've attended one of those sessions. They're good fun. It's people playing paintball out in the bush essentially. But I do like there is a contingent. It profiles these people who are essentially like. Training, fighting, combat, jiu-jitsu training for fighting in a race war, which is what's going on there. So, I mean, clearly intelligence agencies are involved with monitoring this activity and monitoring what's going on in these Telegram groups and this sort of stuff online. But to the extent
my question is, at what point do you act?
To the extent that they can actually jump in and prevent something before it happens, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. Is that I think you don't want to blow your cover. If you've got 30, you go, okay, there's going to be 30 guys showing up. That's not going to be great, but the police will be able to.
I don't know. Like I feel like with
unless it's a terrorist attack or something like that,
like religious-based terrorist stuff, like whether particularly with Islamic, Wahhabism and jihad and all that kind of crap. I feel like they're a lot more proactively onto this.
Proactive to the point of like the FBI in America is proactive to the point of entrapping people. Like
right,
literally, like there have been a number of documented cases where the FBI is like approach someone who's an Arabic guy
do some
and
terrorism?
like, anyone want to? Boy, I'd really love to do some terrorism. Man, I'm feeling some terroristy stuff coming on right now. Anyone to join me in some terrorism? And then the Muslim guys have turned around to the FBI and gone, guys, there's this guy, this Muslim guy. I think he's going to do some terrorism.
Yeah,
and like reported the FBI mole to the FBI. It's crazy.
Yeah, because it's just fucking abhorrent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right, Adam. They're much more proactive when it's a Muslim person. Compared
well,
to
just in terms of the legal, the legal triggers to be able to. I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether these guys are just doing think tank stuff or whether the Nazis are actually if they're attending a training camp. Well, what kind of training camp are we talking about? Is it a retreat where we drink coffee and go for bagels and talk about?
Not bagels. Definitely not bagels if you're a neo-Nazi.
Or is it
toast?
Or is it
some good Australian white toast?
And go shooting. That's pretty dodgy.
It's probably them getting together to get all the tats that they have as well. Because some of the shots from the photos from Melbourne yesterday, there were some Nazi tattoos on those guys.
The most disturbing thing from the Revealed Amongst Us documentary, to me at least, was the indoctrination of young children, young men in the 16, 17, 18, being like gophers for the group. Daryl, go fucking get this, get fucking Gatorade for the guys. Go, sort of indoctrination.
The pyramid scheme is what you're saying.
Yeah, quite literally. It's like you're getting involved in a hate group from a very young age, before you've developed any sort of critical thinking skills, because just your dad's part of it, or your uncle, and it's part of your family. It's like a man thing that we do on the weekends. We go and if it was just about jiu-jitsu and a men's support group, that'd be fine. Fitness is important. It's good for your mental health. It's the killing Jews part of thing that really, really sours the whole experience for me. And starting it on, a race war is really kind of problematic. But that was really scary to me. The fact that and that's why I sort of mentioned the thing about the guys before about, people sort of coming out of these groups. And that's what we want, right? We don't want just condemn a person forever because they've been part of this group. We want to get them out of this way of thinking. You got to think of it like someone who's in a cult.
Well, that's how you
want
fight
to deprogram this and deprogram this kind of extremist behavior and make them functioning members of society again.
Insight on SBS had a really good episode about that, about how do you come out of an extremist group, on whatever kind of extremist group it is, and how that is for people. I've probably online somewhere. Probably recommend looking it up. But do we have anything else to say about this before we talk about
Nazis are
lots
bad.
of money that we're spending on other things?
I think not to flog a dead horse, but I think yet another reason the cops shouldn't be at Pride.
I fucking knew you were going to bring that up.
What?
Whatever.
Literally yesterday, they cracked and beat up queer protesters and allies. Let the Nazis do their thing. Yep, nah.
A different state, but sure. Anyway.
Still, there's Pride stuff all over the world, Adam. Doesn't have to necessarily be Mardi Gras.
How dare you use a news story to shoehorn your narrow political opinion into a discussion? That's my job.
It's almost like we're in a podcast where we get to expound your personal opinions about things.
This is bullshit. I thought this was a journalistic endeavor. So speaking of journalism, there was the press club this week. Had a chat to former Prime Minister and current saggy old man Paul Keating about the submarine program.
Current Grumposaurus
Rex.
Could we potentially talk about the fact that what he's commenting on first?
Sure, we'll talk about that was my segue, Adam. That was my way into it, and then we'll talk about the program, and then we'll talk about Paul Keating's comments on the program. And before you know it, we'll be at an hour, and you'll be looking at me going, "Oh, I got to wrap this up. I got to go take a shit or whatever it is you do," and then we'll get off the show, and then you can go to your life, and I'll go to my fucking life, and then we won't talk for another week, as is tradition.
Adam's afternoon shit on a Sunday is a sacred time, George.
Sunday is the day of rest.
Anal activities alone,
Don't
please.
say anal activities. Jesus Christ. So tell us about the submarines you're excited about, Adam. We're gonna spend $368 billion for these fucking submarines.
$368 billion
over the course of the next couple of decades. And
I assume that'll buy us a lot of submarines, right?
Not really.
No. Not at all.
Not so much. Eight submarines for $368 billion. Well, 268 to 368. There is a bit of a margin for error there. As we all know.
It's $100 billion.
That's all right. What's $100 billion between mates?
Josh Frydenberg told us you can find $60 billion just out behind the couch.
Behind the couch. Oh, what's this? Is my job seeker? Oh, there you go. $60 billion.
Whoopsies.
Whoops. I forgot to carry the 60. So
Anthony Albanese this week, they finally had the AUKUS deal conference thing. There was a press conference. They signed some paperwork. They announced it. They've been backgrounding it to the press for the last 2 months.
That's why Peter Harcher's been just furiously masturbating over the pages of the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age, just Reds under the bed, fucking just spaffing, propaganda on the front page.
So the program is for 30 years. This is the length of this is the thing that staggers me. This program that we've got going will still be going in the 2060s, and they're still going to be building boats under the current plan in the 2060s. I'll probably be dead by then.
Well, probably not. I mean,
I don't know. Who knows? But
are you planning on
did
dying
Adam just say he plans to be dead?
Killing himself. That's what I heard.
Oh, hang on. We're 20. I'm 20. I'm 30. What am I now? I'm 30 something. So another 30 years, and that will be 20.
60
something. I'll be 70. I'll be in my 70s in the 2060s.
Yeah.
It's pretty old. Anyway. So the point being is that, it's a long program. But, again, there's a lot of not a whole lot of detail in it specifics. There's sort of vague numbers. So one submarine is going to be built every 2 years from the early 2040s through to the late 2050s, and this will be basically a British and Australian design using American technology. Prior to that, we're going to basically just scab a bunch of boats. Sorry, not ships. They're called boats because they're submarines. From the US. Some of them, which may be secondhand. All of this needs congressional approval, and that's not necessarily guaranteed.
Congress will be thrilled to. Congress will be thrilled to give us their shitty secondhand boats at a premium.
Yeah,
how many billions? Are you sure? Yeah. In Australian dollars or real dollars? Real dollars. Okay, fucking go for it. It's incredible that they're paying that.
This is subject to congressional approval is possibly the worst sentence in the English language.
So the other thing, of course, is that American shipyards already can't keep up with current production. Yeah. So, which is part of the reason why we may be getting secondhand ones. So as part of that, we're going to give money to the US. I'm assuming we're probably also in debt to the US to some extent. But anyway, we're going to give money back to them to pay for part of this submarine system to help, contribute to their production line, basically. And they're also going to start basing nuclear subs. American and British nuclear subs will be based in Australian waters from the next couple of years. So there'll be a rotating submarine force coming through Western Australia, basically.
This is some gambling for Anakin Skywalker's freedom from Watto bullshit.
No
this
credits.
Just deal makes
Only
no
money.
sense. Just to be so
take the girl.
Here's my what does he fucking say? Is here's my deal. If we win, you keep all the winnings minus the costs of the parts we need, which of course you can only get from Watto, so he gets that money anyway, or you keep the ship. So we're being hey, look, we will pay you to buy some submarines, but you have to build them, right? So we'll also pay you to build them, on top of us paying you to build them already to buy them, but also you can't build them, so we'll pay money to also build a thing here that'll build the things. So we will pay not only to build our own, we'll pay you to build some, and we will pay you extra to allow you to build the ones we paid you to build.
And if it's okay with you, sir, I'd like to give you a tip.
Yes, I'd like to.
Please,
give you a
Daddy,
tip.
may I have another?
Yeah. And the finest hand job you've ever had.
It's you've basically more or less echoed Paul Keating's criticism in a much filthier way. It's more or less, it's just this is the worst deal in history. We're paying $368 billion. We're doing a bunch of the work, and we get at the end of the day 8 submarines, of which 2 or 3 will be active at any one time. And the point is to defend Australia against the Chinese, or we're protecting the shipping lanes. that we have with China from China. Like, it's not exactly clear what the strategic. Yeah. It's like all of the trade that we have is like number 1 with China, number 2 with Japan. So it's like, yeah, we're going to go have we're going to defend ourselves against the Chinese. It's like, if we go to war with the Chinese, everything's over. It's all over. Our economy's over. Everything's over. It's done. Like, so who are we defending? What is the purpose of these submarines again? It just seems so backwards.
It's funny that Paul Keating, like every time something happens, the Labor does, they're like, Paul Keating, would you care to comment?
Paul Keating, would you care to be a messy as fuck bitch about this, please?
Oh, I love an ex-prime minister. An ex-prime minister are such messy bitches, and I'm here for it.
Anything to do with superannuation or submarines, they're just like, all right, wheel out Paul. They're just, and they just wheel him out, prop him up in his Hannibal Lecter chair, and they go, Paul Keating, would you mind slagging off some of the Labor leadership about this? And he does not mind. I just watched the press club interview that he did about this, which is an hour. It's just Paul Keating just absolutely hoeing into the Labor Party and journalists. They're just like, how is China not being provocative? And he's like, you're stupid. That's a stupid question. You should hang your head in shame. Shut up. Next. It's just like, holy shit.
He absolutely rinsed Matthew Knott.
Oh my God.
He absolutely rinsed him.
Oh, that girl from Sky News. Oh my God. He was just like, I might have missed that sit down. And she was like, thank you very much. I'm sorry. Thanks. Thank you. Please, sir, may I have another?
One of the main line that he got that's been playing on the headlines is that it's the worst deal. It's Labor's worst deal since conscription.
Yeah. It's just pretty bad. That's bad.
It's pretty bad.
That's pretty scathing.
Meanwhile, Dutton's like, yeah, like this guy, in one hand, the opposition were like, yeah, this guy's right. But also, we also want submarines.
But also, it's our plan and we'll defend it to the death. That's literally what he said. He said, like, we will defend this come hell or high water. Which, I mean, given that the water is rising due to climate change, it might prove useful to have submarines in hell or high water.
I was going to say maybe put an and in there, because if the thing is like come hell or high water, defend them, you probably want to put the and in there to give yourself the out.
the whole, but I don't know. I like as spicy as Paul Keating's take on this was this week. I'm inclined to agree with him on a lot of. Yeah. The only thing I don't agree with him on is like, yeah, I do think the AUKUS submarines are a gigantic waste of money and it's only going to get bigger. Having a deterrent where you've got 3 nuclear-powered submarines floating around in there at any one time, because you might have 8, but only the best military in the world will only have 30% of their navy deployed at any one time. So you're going to have 2, maybe 3 of these out there. For the same money, you could get 40 to 50 Collins-class submarines, which would be used purely defensively. His argument was, I was there, I procured them. The Collins-class submarines are built for Australia to defend Australia in Australian waters.
To be fair, though,
whereas these AUKUS submarines are literally built to support American hegemony in the South China Sea. That's the whole point, is to be in deeper water than is around Australia 4 months at a time and evade detection. So it's like, okay, well, how does that help you defensively if someone's trying to attack your country? It doesn't, right? Like
the thing with the Collins, it's kind of rich because the Collins class submarine program was previously the worst defense program on record, where they
was that a Keating decision?
Until now,
started as Keating.
Yeah, Keating.
Really, should he have phrased it as this is the worst decision made by Labor government since the one I made?
I mean, it's the Collins class program started off meaning well, but same thing. There were the whole program was too big. It wasn't scoped correctly. There was no direction. The implementation was flawed. And then we got to a point sort of 6-7 years ago, maybe a bit longer than that, where half the boats weren't even working at any given time. But I guess I don't know. I mean, there is this fascination with submarines within defense circles, and I this is the thing, is that I'm not an expert on submarines, so I don't know.
Well, neither are our politicians.
Whether one submarine's worth, 30 destroyers, in terms of the strategic value. I do know that you can't hit what you can't see, so that's good. If you give, these things have vertical launch tubes, so you can fill them up with hypersonic missiles, and maybe that's useful in certain circumstances. They also can be used for intelligence
but they
gathering.
Don't have nukes, so it's not like the kind of deterrent that when you have like America has nuclear submarines roving around, you go, okay, you might be able to hit the mainland, but we can shoot a nuke back from an undisclosed location somewhere in the sea at any point, and it's going to be able to hit you. Like it doesn't have the same deterrent if you don't have nukes, which we don't. So it's like,
and I would say, you can't hit what you can't see. Adam, I raise you a little game called Battleship. Can't see shit, and I hit that stuff.
Well played.
But I don't agree. The only thing I probably don't agree with Paul Keating on is he seems to have a very dovish view of China. And I think I do think China is a threat in the region. I do think they I think the likelihood of them going to war in Taiwan and, potentially other places in the South China Sea over territorial waters is I think there is a not insubstantial chance of that happening in our lifetimes. If you listen to the Hawks, they'll say it's in, the next 3 years it's planning to happen. So, but I don't think that or any of that necessarily represents a major threat to Australia. Paul Keating's so basically what you're saying is you're expecting China to invade Australia. They're going to come, they're going to take their navy, they're going to take all of their million-man army, and they're going to go 10 days south in order to invade Australia. Is that what you're saying? Because that makes no sense on a number of different fronts. And I was like, yeah, actually, that's a really good point. If that's the scenario we're worried about is national defense, I think it's a non-starter. I think there's a half a dozen other countries China would go to war with first before Australia. So I don't think it's really about national defense. It's about them being the hegemon, being the chief swinging dick in the region, and us buddying up with America to help prevent them from doing that. That's what this whole thing is about. So
it's the strategic power play, and it is interesting that we're.
But what business have we got? Aside from being America's little bitch, what interest?
The trade aspect, and it's a matter of principle as well as to whether or not you think
they need our iron ore. They need our materials. They can't fund. There is no better source of dig out of the ground materials to build construction things with in proximity to China that is better than Australia. So they need us as much as we need them. It's yes, we're
to a certain extent. There is growing Chinese interest into Central Asia in terms of Kazakhstan and stuff, getting materials from there. But I guess,
but then why do they? I don't know. It doesn't make sense if they want to keep the commerce flowing between the two of us.
It's a matter of principle.
It doesn't make sense that they would invade us.
It's the question of whether or not you think Taiwan is just the last holdout from the Civil War, and who cares where the microchips come from, or whether it's a question of if they take Taiwan, does that then represent a threat to everywhere else? And then there are certain war games where, if for them to take Taiwan, they would have to do certain other things to shore up a certain flank, which means you have to maybe, put assets into the South China Sea, which stops trade and all this other kind of shit.
Again, I think that would be devastating if China invaded Taiwan, and I would feel a lot of sympathy, and I would be in support of any plans to donate resources and maybe military hardware like we're doing with Ukraine. But I don't see, I don't want to, I'm not going to go send my son to die in a Taiwanese Chinese war. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. I just don't feel that strongly about it's China's backyard
that's
to a certain extent.
That's what people don't really understand. That's what's not really portrayed in the media is that it's, China's big and they're scary and they're ramping up their navy to invade Taiwan. That's what's happening. But as Paul Keating has said, and you've pointed out, it's not really talked about that. What we're talking about here ostensibly is do we want to pick a side with this? I don't know.
It kind of shows by signing up to this AUKUS deal, we're picking our side, and our side is America.
Which is hilarious because at the same time...
I thought we were doing strategic ambiguity. We don't know which side we're on. Whose side are we on? By the way, we're giving America $368 billion over the next 40 years to build devices explicitly designed to fuck around China's control of the situation in the South China Sea. But who knows which side we're on? We're completely ambiguous. Okay, buddy.
And that's it, is that Labor's current line is they support a one China policy, but it's the status quo. Which, like, what does that mean? Like
nonsense defense speak.
Yeah, gotta love a nonsense sentence.
I just hate that there's $368 billion. I know it's over 3 decades, but like at $368 billion, that could go to, there's an opportunity cost. We don't talk about this. Whenever we spend money on these military programs, whenever we spend money on the NDIS, National Disability Insurance Scheme, it's like, oh, how are we going to pay for it? The scheme's going to go bankrupt in 3 years if we don't pay for it. Oh, no, how are we going to pay for it? Money. Oh, the money's running out. What the fuck are we going to do if there's no fucking money? Debt and deficit. Labor's debt and deficit bomb disaster. But you guys need $368 billion for submarines? Yeah, no worries. It's like, but there's other things.
Are you worried about where that money's going to come from? Yeah, I'm sure you figure it out.
Exactly. There's other things that we need this money for to develop Australia. And there might be geopolitical situations overseas which could endanger our interests, but that's why you have diplomacy. You know, like if we're investing $368 billion into our State Department to our Foreign Affairs Department to go and deal with these and sort of, do forward-leaning kind of active diplomacy, I think we'd be in a position where we don't need nuclear-powered submarines. Like, I just don't know why. It's like when it comes to hardware and tools, everyone's like, ooh, I got my cool new Hot Wheels. That's cool. But do I want to actually spend any dollars in preventing this fucking war that I'm saying is absolutely going to happen? Well, no, that would cost money.
It's about creating a buffer zone. If that's the other aspect, is if we're worried about, potentially seeing stuff coming towards us before we, so we can detect stuff early.
But this is what Paul Keating was saying. It's like we've got radars. It's pretty shallow waters. Like we would just bomb them with planes if we saw them coming. Like you can't not see the Chinese invasion coming to Australia. Like you would see that. That would show up somewhere.
The Australian radar is actually not that great to the north. It's going under
You'd see it on fucking Google Maps.
But you can, I mean, an effort, even if they're going to take Taiwan, an effort to do that would be noticeable. You would know and you would have several hours notice.
You'd see build-up. It was the same thing with Ukraine. There's military build-up around the fucking borders. Like, this is going to happen in the next couple of days. Sure enough, it does happen. It's like, we would know if something like that was coming. It wouldn't be a case of just like tomorrow when the war began, you go off to a camp over the weekend and you just come back and the whole place is, you just come back and all the street signs are written in Chinese. You go, oh, fuck, did we get invaded over the weekend?
I mean, George, you say that. Adam turned his phone off for 6 hours yesterday and Nazis rocked up at Parliament. I mean...
Just don't turn your phone off.
Yeah, it's because Adam turned his phone off entirely.
Yeah,
I guess we owe Posey Parker an apology. Sorry, your rhetoric didn't attract the Nazis. Adam turned his phone off. Our bad.
Posey Parker sounds like that's an interesting name.
Posey Parker.
So it's more or less what I've been saying the whole time is that the submarine program is a big waste of fucking money, and there's other things that we could be spending. People are becoming homeless because they can't afford their groceries. Like, there's other more immediate problems that deserve our time and attention and money, rather than what potentially might happen with some submarines over something that happens in the South China Sea in 30 years. Like,
well, we can just let people eat those nuclear power submarines.
Hopefully they don't. Well, we'll all be living in them when the whole fucking country's underwater from global warming.
There you go. There's an upside.
I find the whole thing a colossal waste of time, effort, money, and resources. There's going to be a massive opportunity cost for Australia. It's not funny. It's just true.
Yep.
Anyway,
well,
one of the previous countries that we had a submarine deal with that fell through was France.
And,
yeah.
You know what the French love more than anything?
A revolution.
Retirement and a revolution. It's the ¿Por qué no los dos? Want to have both?
Yeah, they love a revolution so much. There's one with a the in front of it. There was the French Revolution.
Didn't they have like 3 revolutions?
French Revolution, but there was the French Revolution. It was a party.
Yeah, so there was a first one, and then the king was out, and then the revolution kind of fell apart, and then they had a king again, and then that sort of fell apart, and there was Napoleon.
Oh, sorry, you mean they ousted the king, not just they had a revolution, but the king's not in today. And we're like, shit.
He was ousted.
Well, we'll come back. So, it's like when all those fucking anti-vax dumb fuck bastards came to Canberra and they marched on Parliament House, and they were like, you realise Parliament's not like in today, right? Like, you're calling for Scott Morrison to come out here and like answer to you, but he's not here, bro. Parliament's not sitting this week. And they're all like, fuck, we just went to the other Parliament House and they told us to come up here. But yeah, that was old Parliament House. There's a newer Parliament House. They're still not here though. So yeah, cool. Anyway, the French are much more efficient than that.
So yeah, if there's something that the French hate more than Americans, it's being forced to work like these fucking Americans with their fucking submarines. It's still okay to make fun of the French accent, right? Isn't it? We're still clear there.
Is it? Sure.
For now.
I like outrageous French accents.
Outrageous. So essentially, Emmanuel Macron, about 4 years ago, proposed a bunch of reforms to the pension system and the retirement age, and they were sort of a central plank of his platform. Then COVID happened, and everyone was like, let's just pop this on hold for a little while and just spend all of the money and make sure that we don't fall into recession and die.
That we have a country at the end of this to even be worrying about.
And Macron has come back and said, no, I'm very annoyed. I'm very sad that my reforms didn't get through the last time, and I'm going to do them again. I'm going to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64, and I'm going to centralize the way their pensions and retirement ages work across all of the various counties and have some reform. And the French said, no, work is tyranny, and fuck you. I'm not working for another 2 years, you piece of shit. Let's burn it all down.
Yeah, they essentially said, oh, well, you want to do that, huh? Well, that's a nice Paris that you have there. Shame if it was set on fire.
Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, I've now turned from a French person to a New Jersey mafioso, but it's a nice Paris there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it.
Just want to take a little pause for a second. George has what I think is a vape in his hand.
No,
and
so
it looks like a cigar.
This is
I feel like you're doing this specifically.
Hey! So this is actually a cessation device. So what it is, it's allows you to breathe. Sort of, I don't know if you can. This mic will pick this up, but
I didn't hear any of that.
You didn't hear that. It'll allow you to breathe through it, and you can put some like little sort of diffuse, sort of like oil flavorings in there, like cinnamon or whatever. But it's not a vape. There's no nicotine. There's no. You're not combusting any material.
So you're just seasoning your air.
Yes, exactly right. You kind of just a sousant of fucking cinnamon with your air.
Just cracking some pepper onto your air.
And the idea is that you don't then go and smoke cigarettes or vape or any of that sort of stuff. So I've been off the vapes for about 2 months, and that's helping me. It's good.
Neat.
And now we know.
And now you'll notice a preponderance of New York mobster accents pervading the show as a result. I'm a bad guy, see? I'm not going to pick up the rubbish in Paris, see?
Rampant gesticulating is probably the thing that I was going for, but yes, I like it.
Yeah.
Anyway, Paris is on fire.
Yeah, the situation in France is very interesting because, there's been a lot of protesting just from the general populace after sort of these announcements. I think especially after now, I guess I'm not fully across how France's legal and political system sort of works, but like the bill was accepted into the Senate for debate or vote or whatever, right? So it wasn't that it was passed, it was that the French Parliament were like, yep, okay, we'll hear it. And that was enough to piss everyone off. So as Adam mentioned before, the city sanitation workers just protested by walking off the job. They went on strike. A little clip from the Wall Street Journal, journal reporter in Paris talked about how the rubbish bins hadn't been taken out by city sanitation for a week at least.
Yeah, 10 days or something, yeah.
So yeah, rubbish was just piling up everywhere. And yeah, there's just been anger and fires in the street. So like, yeah, wow, when the French are passionate about a cause, they go for broke. I remember the what was it, the yellow vests thing from 2018, which I remember at the time I wasn't particularly a big fan of because I think I was a bit more ignorant of sort of maybe what kind of, you know, political protest sort of looks like in certain circumstances. I was a bit like, nah, you're setting stuff on fire, people aren't going to listen to you. But I don't know, in the years since, I feel I've changed on that view.
Tom's developed a much more eat the rich mentality. His palate has developed for eating the rich.
It certainly has. It certainly has. And yeah, so wow, they are mad about this.
I saw
it
this
made me
report.
Look at our retirement age, which is 67. So
is it 67? I thought it was 65 here.
No, it's 67 for us. I looked it up. It was something like, hang on, I had it here because it's broken down by depending when you were born. So people born between the 1st of July 1952 and the 31st of December 1953 in Australia, it's 65 and a half years. 66 years if you were born between the 1st of January 1954 to the 30th of June 1955. And 66 and a half years if you were born from the 1st of July 1955 to December 31, 1956. Everyone from then on, it's 67 years.
And particularly if you live in the seat of Aston, then obviously it's 65. You do whatever you like. I know there's a by-election coming for, you know, obviously we want some of those older conservative type voters to vote for us. So in that case, don't worry about it. But
and if you were born between the 1st of January 1954 to the 30th of June 1955, it's normally 66 years. But if it was a Tuesday when you were born, it's actually 64 years. We call that like the cheap Tuesdays retirement age deal.
Nice.
And it just gets bananas
standing
from
on your
there.
left foot?
Yeah, 67 for us. So not until just before the 2060s, Adam, if you're
that's all right. We're all going to be we'll all be dead by then, according to Adam. Yes, that's what I was about
You'll
to say.
be dead by then and not paying your taxes to pay for our pensions, you disingenuous swine.
Shitlord.
That's a big part of the French situation as well, as to like the problem that they are having with a more aging population and earlier retirement than the way that their pensions are set up, you know, being paid through people's taxes. If more people are retired because just they are literally older, and from being 62 onwards, there are fewer people earning, working, and therefore having an income to be taxed, to be paying for the more pensions that need to be paid out because more people are retired than working or whatever. So it's a crazy balancing act in this kind of, what do you call it before the show, Joe? Like pyramid scheme?
It is a bit of a pyramid scheme. Yeah, so
a pension.
Essentially the way it worked before, it was like, back in the day, it was sort of 4 to 1 in terms of how many people were paying into the system versus how many people were drawing from the system. And now in the French situation, it's like 2 to 1 or 1.8 to 1 or something like that. And that the maths of that just doesn't work. If you've got a younger population and the population is growing, the economy's growing, this all makes sense. But in a situation where the birth rates really slowed down, which happens as nations get wealthier, the birth rate slows, people sort of go down to that more sort of 2.2, babies per couple kind of ratio. What happens is all of these economic indicators slow down unless you do something like pump your immigration, get new people in, get them working and paying taxes, and basically continuing the birth rate by subsidizing it from outside nations that have a lot of, immigration leaving the country and coming to yours. So, so recently the pension scheme lost 1.8 billion. It's projected to lose like tens of billions by the 2030s per year. You just need more people paying into it. And Macron, well, the allegation is these changes wouldn't actually do that much to help that. But it seems like a very sort of neoliberal type thing. Oh, we got to sort of reform the, pensions and productivity and all that sort of stuff.
Well, to be fair, they're in the European Union and they've got the lowest, I'm pretty sure they've got the lowest retirement age in the European Union.
But the way the French conceive work is very different. I was hearing a report about this week where they're like, work is shit. And you basically do a job to get to retirement age so you can start living. You're like, life begins at retirement. And that's when you go and you hang out and you sort of travel a bit and you go play pétanque with your buddies. Like it's a very similar kind of idea in Greece. It's like work is not a career. Work is a thing you do for the time that you are obligated to do it.
Yeah.
You do it for as long as it is necessary to be able to retire and not have to work anymore. And you just spend the rest of your life enjoying yourself. And I was like, I know like economically that's probably bad, but like, man, that sounds good. Like it's just just be a little seaside, little fishing village in the south of France, just hanging out with my little coffee and my little pétanque.
I think it'd be a lot healthier for people to kind of view work that way sometimes as well. It's just like some people are like, I'm not achieving enough. I'm not changing the world. It's like you just need to be taking care of yourself. Like stop putting like you don't have to be the next god they'll write history books about.
You know, there have been times where I've had to work, you know, evenings over the weekend. Because like, oh, we've got this big thing coming up and we need to do. I was just like, I think we need a healthier balance, like the French have. I'm not saying we need to be all like, "Vive la Revolution." Let's start chopping heads at the guillotine. But I certainly think that a better work-life balance, rather than this thing of like everything you do needs to be devoted to productivity and advancing your career and pushing forward and getting more and getting better. It's like, actually, maybe work is just a means to an end. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
well, no, my career is my identity, George.
But why? What's so good about? Yeah. What's so fucking good about you?
Look, it only took me 15 years to get to that realization. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I haven't lost any time in savings and all that kind of stuff. But it's all good.
Well, I didn't share it to the rundown, and I think that Australia is like the Productivity Commission or whatever, like the head body making recommendations around,
I saw this,
you know, workers' rights or like, you know, like proper efficiencies and in like in a legal framework for workers and everything, was straight up recommending the 4-day work week to the Australian government, pretty much. So it was like following like various different, so like every 5 years they make their recommendations or whatever, and they were like, everyone could stand to work on average 4 hours less a week, which would probably then round out to being 4-day work weeks being considered full-time work with no losses to wages. And you would see either no loss in revenue or even a boost. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I agree. We just had a 3-day weekend recently with like a public holiday. And every time I come back from a 3-day weekend into a 4-day work week, I am way more productive and onto it in those 4 days than I am in a 5-day work week. Well, you need one day to just do fucking nothing to recover from your week. You need a day for chores and life admin-y bullshit, like take the bigger things to take care of the house.
Spending 6 hours in the garden.
Yeah. You know, doing all the shit that like actually keeps your household running and all that you don't have time to do in an evening after work. And then you need a day to have a big fucking piss up. Like you need your day where you do the big thing of like, oh, we'll go out of town to like a country winery or like, you know, the big like fun shit. You need those 3 things on a weekend. You can't fit that in 2 days. You got to sacrifice one of them or feel like shit come Monday morning.
Yeah, and you also got to like you got to do the 4-day work week, but then you can't also have the scope creep of like, oh, can you hop on this meeting at like 8 a.m. or can you
100%.
Can you then jump on this meeting at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday? Like, can you also do this? Can you do that? Can we have this? Oh, we need this contract in by Monday, so we got to work the weekend. Like, you know,
at least not without enough forewarning for you to rearrange the other parts of your week. If it's like, oh, hey, I have a 7 p.m. meeting on this day, like, okay, cool, but like, I'm not coming in till lunchtime on Tuesday. Like, you've taken up 3 hours of my evening. That's 3 hours of another work day then.
I think it depends on the industry. Like, there are certain industries where it's not, where you kind of have to have people, but I guess that's the same as it currently is. You have to have people working pretty much all the time.
You just roster
it definitely suits. The 4-day thing suits office workers, whether or not it really works for. Nurses. I mean, I'm assuming they would have looked at it, but like, well, I'm thinking like manufacturing stuff where there's warehouses.
Well, if you have the right amount of staff, it's a full-time, but it's about an employee. It's not about open hours of the business.
Right.
It's about what a full-time employee is considered to be. So you could have a warehousing system that's operating 24/7, but no individual employee is working more than 30 hours or something like the. I don't know, maths in my head. But yeah.
I know. I feel
that's how it's meant to work.
I mean, the concept is, though, that people become more productive because there's less time to do stuff. Yeah. But, like, I don't know. People at my office go for a lot of coffees, a lot of vapes. And it's like, I don't know if they're going to necessarily be...
You don't have the time to fuck around because it's like you've got less time. You still got to get the same amount of things done. So you can't go out for vapes and coffees. If you're there at work, you got to be working.
But I think it's also a thing of... But it's not so much, though... It's kind of... It makes you more realize... How much of your workday you actually like actively doing a task compared to, that was a 5-minute aside where I just sorted a thing, or like I got up to get coffee then and all that sort of stuff. It's like, oh no, you can get the same amount of work done in that shorter amount of time if you better apply yourself. And you'd probably better apply yourself if you are less burnt out.
Yeah.
Which having an extra day for not work stuff, in my situation, helps. So
I get so much more done working from home. I know when I'm in the office, I plan to do less things because it's exactly what you say. Oh, hey, do you want to go out for a coffee? Oh, hey, you're here. Can I just talk to you about something really quick? Let's just chit chat. Mm-hmm. Spend 15, 20 minutes talking about something that wasn't my task. It was someone else's thing that they wanted my help with, or they wanted some advice on, or you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of, I know for a fact when I'm in the office, I do less. I plan to do less and I do less. So if you...
I think it depends on the kind of job you're doing.
It depends. Of course it depends. Yeah, you can't be a heart surgeon and you go, oh, sorry, I don't do... sorry, don't die on the Friday because that's when I have my days off. Like, obviously
but also
not.
It's why probably heart surgeons would get paid a shit ton more than someone who...
I think for most office work, most knowledge workers, I think a 4-day week would be good. And from what I've seen from the trials, the data seems pretty unanimous.
We're seeing it around the world.
It's positive.
Like it's not just well, of course in Sweden it works because of like Swedish culture. It's like no, it seems to be consistent across the world.
and it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. If you want people to stay and be part of your company and grow the company, if you think that there's value in that, then you should try and, which there is, then you should do things that make them want to stay at your company. And if they're happy and their life is balanced and they've got time for all the things and they get that with you and they don't get that with another company, well, guess who's got a fucking employee for life in that case? To be like, great, well, this is a really sweet situation that I've got where I'm working 4 days a week, getting paid for 5, and I can sort my life out. Yeah, I'm going to leave this job fucking never because that's a great situation, right?
Yep.
So,
speaking of great situations, banks are collapsing.
Oh yeah, this is a fun little story to end on. So you guys might have heard about Silicon Valley Bank, which is an institution that collapsed last week. Didn't really talk about it last week because the situation was still sort of developing. But essentially, we'll give you a really quick step-by-step of what happened. So basically, Silicon Valley Bank, as the name suggests, deals primarily with tech startups in Silicon Valley. They've also got or had branches over in the UK and other places as well. But it was devoted to banking for startups, tech startups. And so just to give you a little understanding of how banks work, for those of you who haven't watched It's a Wonderful Life, you deposit $10,000 in the bank. They're obliged to keep around 10%. So they've got about $1,000 in the bank, and they lend that $9,000 out to someone else, in the form of a credit card or a business loan, and they have $9,000 and they go to their bank and they say, here's my $9,000. And the bank says, so, it's debt. When you conceive of it that way, creates economic activity and allows people to do things that they wouldn't have been able to do if they were just relying on their own backs. And that kind of, it's called a dollar multiplier effect. The more of that debt exists, the more money there is sloshing around in the economy, the more opportunity there is for people to build businesses and buy things and do things, right? So like $10,000 on paper ends up being about $100,000 in the circulating around the economy, right? The problem with banks is because they only keep a certain portion of this money on hand, if you want to pull it out, and all banks operate like this, if with what happened here at Silicon Valley Bank, where people wanted to pull out $42 billion in a day against a $127 billion capitalization,
Yikes.
They're not going to have the money to do that, and the whole enterprise.
I don't have your money.
Collapse.
It's in Bill's
It's in Joel's house and Bill's house. And, yeah, exactly right. Yeah. I don't have your money. It's a bank. I don't keep your money. You think I've just got a big vault with the money in it. So yeah, there's been a lot of clips of It's a Wonderful Life circulating the internet this week for good reason. But so essentially what SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, did was they decided to buy bonds a couple of years ago at low interest rates. So this is when, you know, the economy was in the depths of COVID, things are going badly. And what they do with those assets, they go, we're representing tech companies. There's a lot of, you know, accounts. There's not that many accounts, but they've all got large amounts of deposits with us that are uninsured. So we're going to put it into stuff that's really safe, government bonds. They, 2 years ago, those bonds were incredibly low interest rate. Well, the government has since started raising interest rates. Jerome Powell.
Don't know if you've noticed.
Yeah, I have definitely noticed. in your monthly mortgage, the interest rates have gone up. So those bonds are no longer worth as much. Startups are also struggling to raise money because, as we've discussed on the show, interest rates tend to hit startups particularly hard because it's all based on future earnings and what the future says you're going to do and how much money you're going to bring back in the future. So if there's high interest rates, you know, if it's more expensive to borrow, then all of those future earnings get discounted. So startups, the people that are putting the money in the bank, aren't putting as much money in the bank because it's harder to raise money for startups right now, right?
Yeah.
SVB says we're going to sell those bonds to raise money. We're looking at a bit of a liquidity crisis. We're going to sell some bonds. We're going to take a $2 billion loss, but we're going to get some liquidity back in the bank, and everything's going to be great. SVB also goes around trying to raise some more money for the bank, saying, hey, we just want a little more capital, neither here nor there. Everything's great. Everything's fine. Don't panic. And nothing makes the market panic more than saying, don't panic. So what happens is a bunch of customers talk to each other, and these billionaire tech geniuses at these tech companies are all in their WhatsApp group. And they say, hey, did you hear about SVB trying to raise some money? That means they haven't got any money. I'm going to pull all my money out. And that's what all the billionaires did. And that resulted in a record $47 billion attempting to be withdrawn in one day. It's basically all the billionaires got around it and said, give me my fucking money. That caused a run on the bank. And now the bank collapsed.
Can you imagine being like the account manager or something for one of these companies? And then, someone comes in, it's like 8:30 in the morning, and you get the call in from whatever it is.
Roku wants their $500 million. Thanks.
Oh, okay, cool. And then, you think, oh, maybe it's a one-off. It's sad, bad day. 5 minutes later, your mate Jim across the corridor gets a call from the other organization. Yeah. Like, that would have been a bad day to be at the office.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
that was a bad
not
day.
A good time.
But it's funny how it's exactly the same kind of problem as what happened to banks in the 1930s during the Great Depression. Is people just freaked out. They wanted their money. My nonno always said, the banks, Giorgio, the banks, they are no good. And they said, I want the money under my mattress, and go fuck yourself. The FDIC only insures deposits up to $250,000. Roku literally had $500 million just sitting in cash, which is like, it's also dumb because it's like, why wouldn't you have that in bonds or something? Like, you just got $500 million in cash. Like, this is just dumb. What are you doing? That's so you're saying that you're going to be insured for $250,000 worth of cash and you've got $500 million in there and just like, well, let's see what happens. Like, so anyway, the government stepped in and said, we're not going to let the bank fail. Everyone's cash is going to be made whole. You don't have to worry about it. If you've got your money in SVB, you can have access to it. There's going to be
that
no
is
problems.
What we call socialism, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, and here's the thing. Noam Chomsky would say, like, that's fine if you want to bail out. If you're a company that's fucked up so royally that you need the government to step in to avoid systemic risk infecting the rest of the system, that's okay. But also, you're going to do things how we do things now. Namely, we can insist on living wages. We can insist on, government contracts. We can insist on, there's all these social things. So we'd be like, okay, or we just own the bank. If the government has to pay for you to get out of trouble, now the government owns your bank. You don't own the bank anymore. Now we own it. So that's fine if you want to bail out JP Morgan, but like now JP Morgan is the bank
instead of the US government.
Yeah, is a subsidiary of the US government. Right, exactly.
There's a good little bit here in this ABC article, which was that the irony is that SVB was one of the leading protagonists for watering down bank regulation that would, in hindsight, have probably saved it from collapse. And the quote is from a gentleman called Dr. Stevenson, was that the head of SVB was the one who lobbied to get those requirements, that their bank be able to pass a stress test.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess a stress test being, how much volatility can you take with your balance sheet?
Yeah.
He campaigned for that to be removed in 2018, and he got them removed. And then they couldn't pass the stress test. Guess what happened? They failed.
It's like that scene at the end of The Big Short where Steve Carell's just like got his head in his hands, and the guy who plays Kendall on Succession now was like, "Yeah, I mean, they got bailed out, but it's all right, boss. Like, guys are going to go to jail, right?" And he goes, "I don't know, man. I think we're just going to be having the same conversation again in 10 years. Like, I don't think anything's going to change." And like, sure enough. Nothing did. 13 years later, here we are, same fucking problem again. Banks doing risky shit, not appropriately taking into account the risk of what they're doing, foreseeing ahead what could possibly happen with people's investments, playing funny buggers with people's money, and then causing a potentially systemic system collapse because people see SVB is going out of business, and so they go, "Oh, maybe Credit Suisse, they're on kind of shaky ground. Maybe I should get my money out of Credit Suisse because the same thing." And you can see how it causes. I mean, the title of this article is "Credit Suisse and SVB banking crises are, quote, not a repeat of 2008," which sounds like a pretty comforting headline until you look at the picture below, which says "contagion spreads." So the problem with all of this reporting is that the more we report about it, the more people talk about it, the more people get anxious and they go, "Oh, fuck, should I take my money out?" They're saying it's not a crisis. I keep hearing the word crisis. It's not a crisis. It's not a crisis. It's not a banking crisis. And I go, "Fuck, is it a crisis?" And then people want to take their money out, which perpetuates the crisis.
See, what you have there is you have a communications problem. You have an image problem.
Failure to communicate.
A failure to communicate.
Also, just to correct before, Dr. Stevenson's full name is Dr. Betsy Stevenson. She's a professor from the University of Michigan.
Was that bothering you because you said Dr. Stevenson was a man? Is that?
Was a gentleman. Yeah. You did.
Yeah,
so it's all good. She was introduced higher up in the thing. So if you just went off Dr.
There you
Stevenson,
go. I assume people are men because they talk in articles about banks.
No, the doctor was the woman, you idiot. That's the famous riddle where they're like, there's the doctor and the woman and which one was the woman? And you go, "You fucking sexist idiot. The doctor was the woman." That's a classic example.
I've not heard that riddle, but neat.
There you go. I have listened, I've learned, and I will check my privilege.
Check it.
Next time.
The woman. It's just turning up articles about Doctor Who.
Yeah. You know what they say about assuming? It makes an ass out of you and us.
Indeed.
So, moving on.
Okay, here it is. When the boy is taken in for an operation, the surgeon says, "I cannot do the surgery because this is my son. How is this possible?" The surgeon is a woman. She is the boy's mother.
Yeah, the surgeon's
It's English. It's a riddle because women in.
Hang on, what was the first sentence again? Because I was like, that sounds really obvious. What was the?
I skipped to the end of it, but a father and son have a car accident and both are badly hurt. They are both taken to separate hospitals. When the boy is taken in for an operation, the surgeon says, "I cannot do the surgery because this is my son. How is this possible?"
Oh, yeah, because the surgeon's his mother.
Yeah.
Or his other father.
It's not a riddle. Yeah, it could be two dads.
So
now the riddle is homophobic.
Riddle.
It was a sexist riddle. Now it's a homophobic riddle. You piece of shit.
Yeah,
it could easily have two dads.
Yeah, but that's just so wild. It's just like, they were taken to separate hospitals and the surgeon's like, because it's his mother. Like, what?
Looking at the webpage, the number one comment is, "He has gay dads." Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
What era was that written in as a gotcha?
Oh, I was like, that's like an old
1930s Greece.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's like a very, very long time ago. I'd fucking hope, but
yeah, where it's like the answer that a woman being a doctor is like the answer to a riddle rather than an everyday occurrence.
Yeah, rather than just something that happens all the time.
The woman was the doctor.
Yeah, I mean, back to the financial stuff though. It just kind of makes you realize how fucking
how
dumb
tenuous the
concept
whole
of
situation is.
Investments as a concept.
Yeah,
because it's literally like it's all based on perception. Like
it's almost like money's made up, and $1 trillion coin will save us all.
Well, I mean,
we can just create $1 trillion coin.
Like, you know what I mean?
Like, cool, I have it now. This is worth $1 trillion because I say so, and like, now I'm a trillionaire.
The market's crashing. It's like, why is the market crashing? It's like, because
it's a graph of rich people's emotions.
Just because it is. This system that we made up is doing things. It's like, yeah, but you made up the system, so can't you then like make it do what you want? It's like, no.
The thing is,
we can't.
It does enable,
except when we can. Like, we can't do that. And then the government goes, "Oh, we'll bail out a bank." It's like, oh, but wait, hang on. But you've said you can't bail out people starving, but you can bail out a bank suddenly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a great video from Johnny Harris on YouTube called "Your Bank Account is a Lie," which is a very spicy title, but yeah, it's kind of true, and it sort of goes into how all of this works with banking and
all digits on a computer.
But it does allow for, and this is something Ray Dalio talks about a lot. I know we're getting to an hour 25, so I'm going to stop talking soon. But something Ray Dalio talks a lot about in his model of the economy is that you have debt cycles, and the way that the economy is able to grow is because of all of this money. You could say fake money, but it's real money to each one of the people. It's just if you look at it all at once, it doesn't make any sense. But like the way debt works, it enables economic growth. It facilitates projects and things that couldn't be done otherwise, but for debt and things like instruments like insurance and all this. You couldn't have skyscrapers without a lot of debt and a lot of insurance, right? So things happen.
Example, Evergrande.
Yeah, which is an excellent example of a towering example of economic success. There's lots of things that couldn't happen in this world without debt, without insurance and all this sort of stuff. But the thing is that what the debt then creates is debt cycles. And there are long-term debt cycles over, a decade, 20, 30 years, and there's short-term debt cycles. And the reason we see all of these booms and busts, the reason why we see all of these so consistently in the economy is that's kind of how the system, not how the system is designed, because no one designed it per se, but that's how the system exists, is because it is revolving around these short-term debt cycles, booming and busting. But the idea is, I guess, that they sort of cycle upwards together over time. And that's just how the modern economy is built, is it's built on that kind of debt funding. That's how all this works, is because of that. So, like, that's all of which is to say, like, you should have properly regulated banks that can stand these stress tests. They shouldn't be campaigning against their own kind of capital controls. And, the fact that their rapacious capitalism was their downfall, right? Because they say, we don't need all these rules. We don't need to have more capitalized, all this sort of stuff, because, we're just a medium-sized bank. We haven't got $250 billion in capital. We're not one of the big boys. So we don't need to participate by these rules. But if they did participate by these rules, it might have given them a better chance of standing up to this crisis and dealing with it when these things inevitably occur. These are normal, expected things, with these debt cycles. But no bank, I don't think any bank in existence could stand up to $42 billion being pulled out in one day. So it's kind of like, is it their fault for being bad risk managers, or is it the fault of, shitheads like Elon Musk all telling their buddies to get their billions of dollars out all at the same time, knowing what will happen if they all do that? Tragedy of the commons.
Why can't it be both?
Maybe it's everyone's fault. Maybe they're all bad. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that do or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow me down to the bank, or I'll be pulling all my money out right now.
Sell! Thanks for listening, guys. I love your faces. We'll see you next week.
Punch Nazis.